Today, we welcome Jerry Brown, Director of Sales and Distribution for Precision Organics. He'll be leading us through a discussion on income opportunities for lawn care management and service companies, and some pricing models and profit potential with a focus on microbial aeration. So without further ado, we welcome Jerry Brown.
Thank you very much, Lauren, and thanks for everybody for showing up and spending some time this morning. I'm a big believer that there's nothing more precious that you have than time, and I'm very appreciative of yours. I'm the Director of Sales and Distribution for Precision Organics. I'm a 30-year veteran of the industry. I'd actually say 30 plus now, but I've been blessed through my career to visit with industry professionals from coast to coast, pretty much all over the country. And I have spent the last 3 years exclusively working with the C20 product and with the developers from Precision Organics, being Dr. John Lloyd from Ohio State University, who's been a research scientist and working towards this product most of his 2 decades, and Dave Fritz, who has a distinguished career in product development, formulating, manufacturing, and it's been a treat to be involved. And we're very excited to be a part of the Tessman family, the Tessman team. We have the C20 product we're going to talk about today has been in limited distribution for the last several years. We took the product nationwide last year. We now have 20 distributors from coast to coast, and everything is pointed in the right direction. So we're very excited to be here. This quote, "It's easier to make a buck than it is to make change." I actually put this webinar program together in early January. And I had no idea at that point in time how much change we would all be experiencing over the last 10 weeks or so. But at the time I put this together, that was a kind of a lighthearted way to say that change is difficult. And this slide actually came from a seminar I attended years ago on change management. And the takeaway was that for a lot of folks, it's a lot easier just to stay the course and do what you're doing rather than look at doing change, because change is hard. Now, based on just a little bit of a segue into what we're talking about today, is putting change in 2 categories. There's involuntary change and voluntary change. And the involuntary change that we are all seeing, we have no control over the timing of those changes. It can be painful and difficult and certainly unwanted, and quite frankly, not many people like involuntary change. On the other hand, and as this quote here references, voluntary change, well, it often takes time because people don't have to accept it. It's voluntary. And but people in general kind of resist it, and they resist it because it changes the way they think or the way they behave or what they believe, but they resist it because it changes things. And if given the option, a lot of folks will simply not change until they come to the conclusion all on their own that whatever the change is might be better or faster or more productive or more efficient. And when they finally decide it's better than staying the course, they'll change. Well, oftentimes, by the time they get around to changing, the opportunity from the change may have passed them by. But I can tell you that it took me several weeks to change my thinking when I was first introduced to this product, now 3 years ago, just about at this time of year. And part of my goal is to kind of help speed up that process. And my objective today certainly is to inspire you all to change the way you think about soil compaction and about nutrient availability. And if you make that change, I personally believe that there is opportunity for income in the 2020 season, profitable income to your organizations. And with all the changes that have been involuntary, my feeling and what I'm getting from service providers all over the country is that certainly this spring season, due to a whole lot of reasons we can spend the rest of this hour on, are going to affect income, certainly for the first half of the year. And we think we may have some opportunities here to help that out, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So with all that being said, objective is to inspire change. I'd like folks to consider changing the terminology we use when speaking about aeration. I kind of consider aeration as more of a process that is performed rather than the objective. So if aeration is a process, the real objective of aeration is relieving soil compaction. Another way to say it's reducing soil bulk density. Decompressing the soil is another terms to use in describing that process. The objective of the process, but realistically, what we're going to talk about is there are two choices when it comes to the process. You can mechanically aerate or microbially aerate. So mechanical aeration or microbial aeration are the choices that we're going to talk about. And so I'd like you to consider changing the way we perform the process of aeration. I'll ask a couple questions here. Where do we need to relieve soil compaction? Well, the fact of the matter is, wherever it exists in an urban landscape. And the reason for the question, if you think about properties that may have large trees with a lot of surface roots, are we relieving the soil compaction in and around all those surface roots with a mechanical aerator? Probably not. Are areas that are terraced, are maybe a little too steep of a slope to put a big piece of equipment on? Are we aerating those areas as well? Maybe a place that has too small of a gate to get the aerator into? Probably not. When should we relieve soil compaction? And this is a really huge piece right here. The answer to that question is whenever you find the soil compacted. But do we relieve it in the spring with mechanical aeration? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think we'll provide you with an opportunity to relieve soil compaction when and where you find it, and very efficiently. And that's what we'll be talking about today. And what plants need relief from soil compaction? Well, anything in the landscape really does, whether it's in a shrub bed or around the base of a tree, underneath the canopy of a tree, certainly, and in all of the turf areas. But if you ask yourself the question, do we take care of all of those currently when we think about the process of aeration? And the answer is probably not, but that's where opportunities exist. So I'd like to take you back a couple hundred years and a little trip through time, but this might be the suburbs of Minneapolis. Much of it might have looked like this: Mother Nature's lawn, a prairie. Every native plant growing out there. That a lot of these are the things that we try to eliminate from our lawns every day. But all of the native plants, all of the weeds, the annual grasses, annual broadleaf weeds, everything is allowed to grow to its maturity and die in place. Annuals dying every year. But all of those plants and their root systems allowed to die in place in that environment. And there's up to 4,000 pounds of decaying organic matter in an acre of healthy prairie. And understand, organic matter contains the carbon that feeds microbes. And the focus of this webinar is carbon, and that being the food source, the energy source for soil microbes. In this environment, left year after year after year, all of these plants allowed to grow to maturity, die in place, start to decay, there would never, ever be a reason to bring in a mechanical aerator into this environment. I think we'd all agree to that. But this is what Mother Nature intended for soil structure to be like. Taking a little bit of a sidebar, some of the other areas in Minnesota, throughout the Midwest really, a lot of areas that weren't covered with prairies would have a forest. And in a forest floor, as this caption reads, in an untouched forest floor that had been allowed to stay in its natural pristine condition, there's up to 36 tons of carbon per acre in the soil of a forest floor. Now, this is an important point here. If we were able to rake through all of that leaves and twigs and stems and all the stuff in the understory plants that are all decaying in this environment, reach down to the soil, grab a handful of that soil and go have it analyzed, what you would find is somewhere in the range of a 20-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So keep that in your mind because it'll be an important number later on. But a 20-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio is what you would find in the forest floor with all of that decaying organic matter. So coming back 200 years to the future, so what we've done is we've taken this prairie, eliminated all of those plants that grow in there that are unwanted, anything that's a weed, an annual grass that doesn't look perfect and pristine. So that we've taken the prairie and turned it into this lawn, and then we decided that we want to take one of those trees out of the forest and plop it right into the middle of the prairie. And this is a residential landscape, right? And as the caption reads, and this is kind of poking a little bit of fun at the fertilizer application that's been done here, but this is not the solution to ensure the desired root to canopy ratio that we would want for this tree. In fact, most of you on this call would agree that based on this tree probably being put in the ground a couple of years before that, knowing what the size of that root ball was at that time and knowing that this is compacted clay soil probably, the odds of any of that fertilizer that's been injected into the ground making it to that root system is pretty much slim to none and slims out of town. But the question I will ask is, go back to that forest floor for a minute. If there's a 20-to-1 ratio of carbon to nitrogen, that much more carbon than there is nitrogen in a forest floor. And once we put this blanket of green down, we've kind of eliminated any carbon from penetrating that blanket because all those annual plants are no longer in play. We have carbon depleted soil that we're pumping nitrogen into. So think of that from a natural environment. Why would we be pumping nitrogen in when probably the bigger need for the root system of this plant, this tree, to ensure the root to canopy ratio would be carbon? Just something to think about. And maybe once we push enough top growth by fertilizing that tree, if we get that fertilizer a little close to where the root system is, fast forward 25, 30 years ago, and we've pushed out a whole lot of top growth, and maybe the root system has not been allowed to keep up, so that root to canopy ratio isn't near what we would like to see it to be. So some of this might be self-inflicted by what we've developed. However, the positive side is we are providing opportunities for those creative people and the artistic people in our community as sculptors and painters with some of the activity. But I'll point to two things on either side of this sculpture here. The trees going down between the sidewalk and the roadway here, and they're not all looking great. But again, the situation that we have put them into is that all this impervious surfaces that are around, they're not necessarily having a fighting chance to develop the type of root to canopy ratio that we'd like to see them have. Some of it's just mere physical restrictions. But this tree to the left of our sculpture, I'm going to guess that's about a 20-year-old tree. And what I'd like you to think for just a minute is, if this tree was in its native natural environment, every leaf, stick, twig, stem, every bird nest, squirrel nest, whatever's fallen out of that tree and landed on the ground would be allowed to lay right there and decay over the last 20 years, creating its own ecosystem to where, again, the root system with all that decaying organic matter and all the carbon that is going to work its way into that soil without competing with the turf right up to the root flare, this would have a completely indifferent environment if that tree was in its natural native environment. Again, just something to think about for the opportunity to replenish the carbon supply underneath the canopy of this tree. So back to the turf again. This is a kind of an illustration of that prairie from a drawing standpoint. But if you look at all of this vast root systems and all of the above ground stuff, and again, all this being allowed to decay and to die in place and decay. And over here on the left, there's a little picture. This could be a typical suburban lawn. It could be a soccer field or a fairway at a golf course or anything that we have covered with this perfect blanket of sod. And quite frankly, beneath that surface, there's very little decomposing organic matter and certainly very little carbon that is being allowed to penetrate into that soil. So the end game is this. On the right is, again, that prairie where all of the carbon available in that first 6, 8, 10 inches of soil, that's a very living, breathing, porous soil because there's a lot of microbial activity. In a lot of the environment in urban landscapes and where all the modern construction has taken place, we've got the carbon amount in the soil has been pretty much depleted, and we're not allowing anything else to get in there. So the soil, rather than being porous from all of that microbial activity, mining and tilling that soil from the underside, none of that's taking place. So that soil becomes more and more compact. And hopefully that's making sense. So a series of questions here. And if we were in a live room together, I'd probably ask the group this question and get a few answers, but for the sake of time, and since I can't see any of you, I'll answer the questions myself. But why was lawn aerator invented? And you probably heard this saying, and applies to a lot of situations in life, but necessity is the mother of invention. I think the aerator was invented because we had developed a permanent perennial crop called a lawn. And we had to find a way to till the soil without completely destroying the crop, right? We can't afford to till the permanent perennial lawn up every year and replant it. It's just, it doesn't make sense. So we had to come up with a way to till that soil and loosen that soil without totally, completely destroying the grass plant itself. So thus the invention of the aerator. And here's some questions about the aeration process as we know it today, mechanical aeration. How long do the benefits of aeration last? And again, if we were in a live room, I'd ask 10 people and probably get 10 different answers. Well, according to the USGA and one of the leading universities in the country, their study shows that the benefits of aeration last about 6 weeks. And so you take that for what it's worth. But if you're doing a fall aeration, probably for the remainder of the fall, but by the time you got back into spring, you're pretty much back to square one. And up until this point in time, most professionals aren't aerating 2 or 3 times a year. But the USGA would suggest that possibly even 3 times a year if you're really trying to loosen that soil and keep it that way, because it's only going to last for 6 weeks. Does mechanical aeration damage the turf? Well, in that 6-week period that the results last, the first thing you have to do after an aeration is heal the turf, because you're going to poke a lot of holes through the root system. And there's probably a real good reason that nobody on the other end of this call is aerating lawns in the middle of July. Because if there wasn't damage to the turf, you wouldn't really worry about it in July, other than watering and the ground being very hard because it's dry. But no one's aerating in the middle of the summer. Mechanical aeration does indeed damage the turf, and the first thing it's got to do for a few days or a week, or depending on the environment. That's why we do it we're in the growing season in the fall, and we don't do it much in the spring, but we do it during a growing season because we can recover from the damage more quickly. How many tine holes per square foot are best? This is kind of a trick question. In my travels in my life, I was at a lawn care company and listening to one of their salesmen talking to a customer that was saying that the aerators that they use pull 18 to 22 plugs, I think was the number, per square foot, which is like 25% higher than any of our competition. And the question I was thinking to myself is, well, how many holes really just rip it completely up? The fact of the matter is the best way to, if you could loosen the soil without poking any of those holes and without damaging the turf at all, would probably be a much better idea. At that time in my career, I had no idea that that idea would sometime come to fruition in my lifetime. How long before customers see results? This is also a trick question because I get this with almost everybody in the lawn care business that I talk to. And as much as I hate answering questions with questions, my answer is almost always, how long does it take before you see the results of a mechanical aeration? And that generally will cause people to pause and think for a moment. But the results you see from that are that the plugs finally melt away and the mud goes away. And after a while, it kind of returns to look like it did before you did the aeration. But the fact of the matter is moisture percolation, root proliferation, having fewer weeds germinating weeks afterwards because you're thickening the canopy of the turf and eliminating weed encroachment. A lot of the results from an aeration, I liken them to changing the oil in your truck. Why do you change the oil in your truck? It doesn't look any better when you do, but you know it runs better and it's more efficient. And that's what aeration as the process does for the lawn. Whether it's mechanical aeration or microbial aeration, that's the benefit, but you don't necessarily see an ocular result. If you're looking to make something greener quicker, go put a ½ pound of urea down and turn it green. You're not necessarily improving the health of anything, but if that's what you're after is green color. Should turf managers relieve soil compaction in the spring? And this is another huge question. The answer is yes, but why don't we? And this is an important piece. We don't because you put down a pre-emergent barrier and it'd be foolish to go poke a bunch of holes in it and encourage annual grasses. But also when you poke those holes, you're also opening it up for sunlight and with the moisture and everything else, dandelions, clover, every plantain, anything that's going to grow in your market area, you're opening it up for weed encroachment. So obviously it's a period of time where weeds are proliferating and you don't want to create problems for yourself. But if you have the opportunity to relieve soil compaction in the spring to somebody that needed it, and you could do so without disturbing the surface of the lawn that you're treating, I believe that is a game changer. So what is the alternative mechanical aeration? Well, to build one, what you would look for is you'd want a consumable carbon food source for the soil microbes to eat, so you could exponentially increase that microbe population to get it back up to something that what Mother Nature would want. Then, if you were smart about it, if you could come up with a carbon source that 50% of what you put in the bag was readily available microbe food, readily available carbon to quickly in the first week or 10 days to build that population up. And then the other half of it was a slower release carbon that would maintain that population for an extended period of time, for a couple of months. And of course, what you'd want to do is make sure that whatever was in that bag was consistent. And back to that forest floor again, the target would be to have a 20-to-1 ratio of carbon to nitrogen. Have that much more carbon in the bag and not enough nitrogen to even report it as a number. And if you're not thinking this way, you need to start. For the future of our industry, things that are sustainable and replenishable and natural and all of those terms that are environmentally friendly, things that are from renewable resources will be incredibly important to all of us in the next decade. And finally, you'd want something that was easy to apply. So if this happens to be a spreadable product that's about a 150 SGN, about like a mini fertilizer. So the alternative to mechanical aeration is microbial aeration by applying C20 soil builder. Just a quick kind of comparison, microbial aeration or mechanical. And obviously this is very slanted towards microbial aeration because I wrote it and I think it's the way we should go. So both of these processes, if you want to call them that, will relieve compaction, but microbial aeration can do so without disturbing the surface of the property that you're treating. And for my money, that is the game changer. Only microbial aeration will relieve soil without promoting weed encroachment. So you can, the 50% of your customers that probably aerate and 50% don't, that's the standard around the United States. But for all those people who don't, you can now split the group and do some of your customer base in the spring, or certainly with all those new customers that you acquire in a normal year. A lot of those people didn't aerate their lawn last fall. That'll be the first thing you're doing for them. But you can do so now without weed encroachment, without disturbing your pre-emergent barrier. Microbial aeration, only microbial aeration. Is there risk? Well, no more than what your normal fertilizer spreader. I guess there's risk involved with that, but there isn't the risk with the heavy equipment and all the things that go along with a mechanical aerator. Only microbial aeration will relieve compaction. This is, I think, a big reason why a lot of people don't sign up for aeration. Everybody out there that's been your customer for 2 or 3 years knows that they should. Why don't they? And if they were being truthful about that answer to that question, a lot of them, it's the mess, the inconvenience. I don't like to have to go out and find all my irrigation heads and mark them all. And even if I do, the guy's going to probably run over a few of them. And it's all those things that are reasons why people don't do this. They've got a couple young children and a dog and the mud and everything else. Only microbial aeration will relieve compaction without all the heavy equipment in a trailer. Another reason why people don't purchase aeration services, but this is a huge one for the service provider. If you don't have to haul around a trailer and another piece of equipment and go and hire additional help to help you push the big aerator around, if you could do if you could microbial aerate that property at the same time you're doing your first application, game changer. Microbial aeration will relieve compaction while improving the performance of fertilizer and mineralizing soil nutrients. We could have another webinar on nutrient uptake and mineralizing nutrients, because that's what soil microbes do. A lot of what you do apply gets mineralized by and made available to the root system of grass plants by microbial activity, the microbial degradation. When microbes feed on carbon, they're also consuming other nutrients, and as that population dies off and turns over, those nutrients are then released and available to the plant. That's what's going on with the fertilizer that you're applying. The problem is if there's not enough microbes, a lot of that nutrients gets tied up into the soil. This will help release nutrients that are in the soil and will also make your fertilizer work better. So I'm going to run over this pretty quick, but here's just an idea for you. And this is real life stuff. $36.95 for a 40-pound bag of C20. That's the pallet pricing for the product, I can tell you that. This is my own personal data. This average price for 5,000 square feet. It's from Kansas City. This is from 4 providers that I know. They've all been in business for more than 10 years. They have brick and mortar buildings, licensed applicators, they're insured, they have logo trucks, they're professional. And on average, and I think it was like one guy was at $110 to about 140, but between the 4 of them, added them up, divided them, it's $120 per 5,000 square foot was their average. Whatever yours is, and I would tell you, if you're anywhere below $100, you might want to go shop your competition a little bit because you're too low. But anyway, so C20, again, understanding that this can be applied while you're there doing something else. And that could be your first application. If you get a late customer that comes on in June this year and you're out there doing broadleaf weed control, you can still do this application and rejuvenate their lawn and get them started off in June. And if you come across a really crappy lawn in the middle of July, put C20 down and water it in. You can apply it while you're there doing something else, so there's no additional travel time. Standard rate, 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So you're going to have $46 in product cost. No specialized equipment, no trailer. You're already standing on the property because you're there doing their round 1 or round 2 or whatever our fall fertilization. But you're already there, so windshield time, travel time, cost of mileage, all that stuff, there's none of that. You got about 15 minutes of your time invested, and that's if you're a slow walker doing 5,000 square feet. I'm giving you, 7 minutes to load the spreader. You got $74 worth of gross profit in 15 minutes. So do the math. That's almost $300 an man hour in profit for this as a add-on service, as an alternative to something that we've all been doing for a very, very long time. I'm going to show you this, and this calculator is available through, I will get this to make sure that everybody at Testament, all the sales associates there have this calculator. And it's kind of a fun thing to work with. This is an example of, this happens to be another friend of mine that's in business. He's got 2,000 customers. We rounded it off for him, but and I ask him these questions. What's your plan? He's planning on 78% of his customers staying with him. I told him that's a little too low. He needs to get better service, but so 5% growth is what he's planning for this year. Now, based on this craziness that we're all living through, that 5% might not happen, but based on what his plans were, it looked like he was going to have 540 new customers to his business. We put in 45% as the number of people that he aerated last year. So when this calculator does all the math, that the total prospects for C20 application for 2020 would be 1,398 real prospects based on the formulas that are put into this calculator. So to be as realistic as we can be, this line right here, what percentage of your prospects are your customers for your prospects for C20? What percentage really don't qualify financially? There are some people that are on fixed incomes, that are living in houses that are above their means, whatever the case might be, but he calculated about 15%. Everybody will tell you that they can't afford it, but that's a lot of that's road noise. There's other reasons why they don't want to do it, but 15%. So this will calculate out his actual prospects are 1,188. This great area here are some things to think about when you're trying to figure out what you think your close rate might be, but certainly high volume prospects are new construction and people who change services. They're coming to you this year because they were unhappy with their provider last year, and there's some other things in there. He picked 25%. He thinks if he really executes a upsell campaign, a add-on service campaign with his customer base, he could close 25% of those prospects. If that's the case, he ends up with 297 sales, average launch 6,000 square foot. That's his price. He's going to generate $38,000 in springtime additional income, of which $22,000 of that is pure unadulterated profit. He's already on a profit. There's a little bit of cost involved in the guy's time, but he's doing four of those an hour. If you've got an hourly employee that's cranking at about $275 of profit per hour, if that's the case, you get out there and do it yourself. It's worth it. But anyway, so very quickly, I'll walk you through. We have some flyers, and some of these are intended for our distributors, but you could also, we'll make sure that you can get these through Testament, and you can send these to your customers. But this, aerate your soil this spring. These last 4 bullet points, if you had your customers, if you gave this to them, letting them know that there's no heavy equipment, no mess, no mud, no broken irrigation heads. These cover a lot of the objections that people have to aerating in a couple of pretty good pictures. I mentioned early on in this about the areas that don't get aerated. And if you've got customers that have surface roots, steep slopes, terraced areas, small fenced in areas, this is an excellent product for turf that is difficult to aerate, and you may have customers that fits. And then we have another fall aeration. By the way, each one of these brochures, if you receive these electronically, this is a YouTube link. There's a 4-minute video, and we worked very, very hard to get this down to 4 minutes. I wrote the script, I narrated the thing, but it's a 4-minute overview of the microbial aeration, the benefits of it. It doesn't sell anything hard at all. It is intended to inspire your customers, to educate them and inspire them to look at this as a viable option. This is a great piece to send to your customers. It will sell C20 applications for you. But it is the same presentation, 4-minute presentation is embedded in the top of all 3 of these presentations. Well, again, for trees, we didn't spend a whole lot of time here, but this Project right here on the left was done in Minnesota. This is a pin oak tree. We've all seen hundreds of these lime green pin oak trees, and if left alone for another year, it starts to terminal dieback, and within 3 or 4 years, it's being replaced. This is 50 pounds of C20 from the root flare, about 5 or 6 feet out from the trunk into this area. This happened to be landlocked by concrete on 3 sides. That's a year later. It's a great product, and it's a great upsell opportunity, a great add-on service for anybody that's in the lawn and landscape business. All you need is a shovel. And if you don't have a shovel, just kind of kick it around with your boots. I'm kidding, of course, but a rake and a shovel is all you need to make these applications, and be more than happy to help you through those. And again, that healthy soil, the root to canopy balance. Here's another flyer for trees that walks people through this. And if they've got large trees, you're more than welcome to use this as a sales aid for yourselves. And we're more than happy to help you in that area. Finally, I pulled this out because this is a slide that I have had for 20 years. And I happen to be going through some old training material, and I spent a decade as the director of training for a large company. And this hasn't changed one bit. It's absolutely true today as it was 20 years ago. But if you're looking for a product for your business to add revenue and add profit to your business for the 2020 season, and it's going to be an unusual one, here's the 3 questions you have to ask yourself. Whatever the question is, or whatever the product is, does the product benefit your customer? And you can put a whole lot of things about C20 Soil Builder where your customer gets great benefit from using this product on their landscape. Does it benefit the plant or the property that you're treating? But certainly from a plant standpoint, from a root system standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint, this has great benefits to the plant. And just as importantly to those two is, does this have a return on investment for you, the service provider, the person that's in business, and you're in business to provide great service and to make a profit at the end of the year? And is there a return on the investment for you? And if your answer to all 3 of those questions is a resounding yes, then this product has value as a potential add-on service for you. It's agronomically valuable. C20 is economically valuable, and towards the future, it is very much environmentally valuable. And environmentally was the one word that I did add to this, because 20 years ago, it wasn't as big of an issue. But C20 Soil Builder for the 2020 season, I think can be of great value if it's positioned properly for microbial aeration of lawns, and for woody ornamentals and shrub beds, and for treating root to canopy ratios, and certainly pin oaks for micronutrient deficiencies. I'll leave you with this. 3 years ago, almost, this might have been even this week, I had been introduced to this product. It took me a few weeks to get my head around Dr. John's research and all the stuff. I was looking at hundreds of pages of stuff. I did this in my own backyard. These are 2 lasagna pans. Drilled holes in the bottom of them. I went over to a construction site, pulled off about 3 inches of soil. It's more like dirt from their foundation was in. They were just getting ready to frame this property up. I put the equivalent 4 grams of turf type tall fescue, because I'm in Kansas City and that's what grows here. So I put 4 grams of turf type tall fescue in each one of these pans. I put the dirt all into one bucket, mixed it all up so they had equal amounts of the equal kind of soil in each one of these pans. I put 4 grams, which is the equivalent of a 10 pound per 1,000 square foot rate, in the pan on the right had C20 added to it. The one on the left did not. Other than that, they were treated absolutely exactly the same, sat side by side, got the same watering, the same sunlight, the same everything. And you can go to our website at www.precisionorganics.com and see about 12 more slides of this entire project. It's up there under success stories. But I did this project myself, and this is the result 44 days after germination. And the only reason the pan on the right is thicker, greener, fuller, and looks like it does. The only difference in those two pans is that one has C20, and there were microbes in the soil there, and there were nutrients in the soil there. And we increased the microbe population with C20 to the point that they mineralize the nutrients, and they are responsible for the way that turf looks right there. I also, if you look, go to the website, you will see that I pulled the pans off and took pictures of the underside, and the root system coming on the bottom of the pan has actually started to grow through the bottom, through the holes. But the root system in the pans on the pan on the right are incredibly different and more prolific than the pan on the left. I just want to show you that because that is the single reason why still to this day, and even more so, that I can speak about this product and what it can do if properly used and used in the right situation. I can speak with great enthusiasm. So that's the presentation from my side. That's my email address right there. If you have questions that you want to take offline or ask me anything, I'd be more than happy to interact with anyone that's, if you're a Testman customer, I consider you my customer, and I represent Testman as their outside sales guy. But anything that we can do to help you be more successful in your business, don't hesitate to contact us, to look at precisionorganics.com as a website. And if there's any questions, I think Lauren is going to take back over. That's what I've got to say. I genuinely appreciate the time that you spent. And again, if you have questions, let me know. Lauren, turn it over to you.